Thank you, sir, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. So, I have been given this unique topic for an auditor's perspective of audit. So, till now you have probably heard about what are the different components of audit, and as many of us are working in clinical diagnostic labs, so we do understand that audit is a necessary part of the whole process. So whenever the word audit or we have an audit which is scheduled to happen, what comes to mind? Maybe a bit of stress, anxiety, the lab gets overwhelmed. The entire focus of the lab shifts to the audit and whatever is related to something. So I will be addressing this issue of auditor's perspective broadly two ways. One is what is the audit and what is the perspective. So this is basically a definition of any kind of audit. It's an official examination of the quality or condition of something which we do or undertake. And the frequency with which audits are conducted most commonly are yearly, but it may be more frequently if it is required. According to labs, it is basically a systematic and independent examination to determine whether the quality activities comply with the specifications and whether these specifications are being implemented effectively. So that is why audits are necessary. Now coming to the other part, perceptions. So I guess many of us may have faced some audit, either internal or external. So what goes through your mind when you have an audit which is scheduled? Do you have, you can speak up if you like. Do you have anything, or what's the first thing when you have an audit that's happening? Yeah?
There are picking up mistakes.
Yeah, so fear is the word that some of our faults will be pointed out, but faults won't happen if nothing is done, isn't it? So if you do something, some of the other mistake is going to happen. So that is one of the perception. It's a very common perception. Even when we undergo audits, we have that. Most of our lab staff, they feel, oh no, if something is not exactly as it is supposed to be, maybe the assessor will pick it up and raise the MC. But why is it so important? So what is the purpose of an audit, or what is the purpose of an MC? Yeah? To maintain the quality, right? So it is for the lab's improvement or betterment of the lab, isn't it? So if it is something which is meant for the good, it should not be causing so much of distress, fear, anxiety, isn't it? So many times it depends on perceptions, and little bit is about the actual things that happen, and a lot of it is about perception. So if you see this picture on your screen, I think you would have seen this. It has been circulated widely on social media for different reasons. So what do you think this picture shows? So basically it is showing a person is going after another person with something which is pointing his hand. And this may be a different perspective where it is basically quite the opposite of what was shown in the previous picture. And this is the complete picture where this is what actually is happening. But because of different perspectives, people are looking at the whole process differently. So the auditor is there, the auditor thinks, okay, I'll see if, from the auditor's point of view, auditor is obviously going to see if all the processes are as per the recommendations, if there is any loopholes, if something is not being followed, and as you have previously heard, if there is any risk associated with those processes which are not being followed, that would probably be raising the MCs. The auditee is like, oh no, the auditor is after me, he's trying to look for mistakes, and that is all that he wants to find out. But whereas it is a bit of both, the auditor wants to see if those mistakes are going to harm the patient in any way, maybe financially, or it can be in different ways. It can be an additional test, it can be because of a wrong QC, It can be a delay in the test report which was given. It may be a wrong test report which was generated for many reasons, from pre-analytical to post-analytical. Pre-analytical, it may be a mislabeling cause which did it. So the thing is, as we have increased our automation, it is humanly impossible for us to look at each and every sample personally and see that the entire process is going on correctly with those individual samples. That is why we have built a system, or we're trying to build a system. So based on that, we say, okay, if the system is in place, then everything is going on fine. And the audit is basically evaluation of how good or robust your system is. And do you need to increase or strengthen your system further? That is what the audit is for. So broadly what happens is, the auditees feel there is anxiety of being judged. What if something goes wrong? What if my lab doesn't get accredited? And the implications. So the implications would vary depending on the kind of organization or institute you're working in. So there is, the reason of accreditation, why do we need accreditation in the first place? It says that your lab is of a certain standard level. Yeah. So if it doesn't get accredited, even though, you may be saying that we are following all QC practices, it is still not yet accredited. You don't have a document saying that it is of that particular standard. So these are the implications. And what would that lead to? It may lead to loss of customers if it's a lab. It may be loss of trust from the clinicians. Okay, I want this. I want a very accurate result for this test, but your lab is not accredited. So maybe I will send it to another lab which is accredited. Although your lab may be equally capable or competent to give the same result. Right. So is audit an investigation, or should it be considered like a troubleshoot? So a common language that is used in many of the opening meets is, it is not a fault finding mission, it is more of a fact finding mission. That is what many of the assessors, auditors always tend to say. And hopefully it should be like that. It should be more of a fact finding mission where they try and understand the processes that are going on in the lab, and based on their experience, their understanding of the system, and there is comparison with the established guidelines. If they feel that there are some lacunae, they would point out those lacunae, which can be based as NCs or observations. So there are certain measures that can be taken to smoothen any audit process, and then you should do as you claim and try to document everything that you do. These are two basic things that are necessary or which are important from an auditee's perspective. So when you're preparing for an audit, you have to be clear as to whenever you're making a document, why you're making that document, who is it intended for? Is it intended for all lab staff, a particular section of the lab, particular processes are being addressed, where should they be kept, and what it is about? Then these documents, there are different aspects of the audit, like the documents, there is document control. All the documents should not be easily accessible to all kinds of lab staff. There has to be a hierarchy. There are different types of documents that are there in NABL. And each one has, the lab personnel would also have a hierarchy amongst their personnel who would have different kinds of access to those documents. Any process needs to be streamlined. You cannot be doing the same thing at two different levels, which will only add to confusion and increase in turnaround time. You cannot write the same thing in three different registers. Okay, if this register goes away, for a backup, I'm writing in another register. So those are like duplication of work. Those are processes which can be streamlined. You cannot have a situation where you are centrifuging it in a very congested place, which is open, maybe prone to aerosols and all those things, which is obviously hazardous. And your analyzing machine, the main analyzer, is on the other end of the lab. So you're going to expose everything. There is chances that there may be spillage, there may be some, the tubes may be kept in a different track, and you may have to devote another person, and it may increase the time to look for a skipped sample or something. So those things are how you try to streamline the processes. And then there are mechanisms by which you can simplify your audit experience. And you may dedicate a person who is looking into quality aspects. One person may be looking into the documentation aspect. And there has to be good communication between all your lab staff. So the NABL always looks at personnel. So there are things which is related to personnel. Are your personnel trained to handle a particular analyzer, a particular system? Are they authorized to do a particular kind of reporting? And do you have a system? All NABL asks for a system of continuous improvement for the lab. So you have to document the evaluation of your lab personnel in a continuous manner. And it has to be relevant. Also, safety nowadays, traditionally we had, the hepatitis B vaccine, which is a must. Now, with pandemics like COVID, you may also need to have COVID vaccination. So all those documentation, vaccination is one thing, documentation is another. So it is not necessary, you have to decide how frequently, if a lab says that their staff are vaccinated, you have to have a document which says when was the last dose taken, are they still immune, and how do you check? So there may be a policy where you are checking the antibody titers against a particular virus, or you have a policy where you say, no, we'll not check antibody titers. Maybe every 10 years we'll do a recycle, or every 5 years we'll repeat the vaccination, give a booster or something. So infrastructure related, a lab may want to do thousands of tests, but is the space adequate? Is the space adequate for not only the analytical process, but also for the pre-analytical and post-analytical processes? Why is that important? If there isn't enough space for either the pre-analytical, so in pre-analytical, there may be confusion in receiving. So every organization would be having a different system of receiving. Some of the samples may be written with hand. Other organizations may be having a barcode. Some organizations may have the barcode being sent and with the lab, and the lab then puts the barcode over there on the sample. So there are chances of error which can be created at these levels. Samples being collected in long tubes, samples which need to be centrifuged are not being centrifuged, which do not need to be centrifuged, may get centrifuged, which will not lead to errors. Samples may need to be transferred in specific conditions under the ice pack. It may be needed that you have to process those samples, especially like, say, IF6 or something like anti-ProBNP, which needs maybe a DTA sample, and it is not collected in a DTA sample. So if there isn't adequate space, you may just miss one of those tubes. So you need a proper space, a trained person who is receiving, because your final report is going to be as good as your material that you're analyzing. Similarly, you should have proper space and storage for your reagent states, QC materials, and they're not all the same. Some of them need to be stored at 228, some of them need to be stored at -20, others can be stored at room temperature. So there should not be any confusion there. If you're making aliquots, you should have a policy about after making the aliquots, what temperature they need to be stored. So those things are important, and they need to be followed and documented. There has to be logs for all of these things. Quality related, so there are many processes which may directly or indirectly be affecting the final patient results. These need to be highlighted in the main quality policy documents and other documents. So you may have a record of temperature or pH monitoring. So pH is important, especially with buffers, wherever buffers are being used, maybe if it's for a state or for a process like electrophoresis. If the pH is not being monitored, you have made the buffer, but you have used it for an extended period of time. And the pH initially was okay, but maybe after a week it's not. But you have not documented it. So your final results will also not be accurate. So those things need to be in place. Temperature monitoring is important because you think, okay, I have used the QC material. The manufacturer of kit says that they are stable for 15 days, or if you store, but you have not stored them properly, or you have stored them after 1 day. So that will obviously have an impact on your QC material and eventually on your patient results. Many times contamination and those things happen. So especially with calibrations, people need to be careful, and these things will happen. The only way you can prevent them is with better documentation and processes which can identify them when they happen and prevent their recurrence. Quality manual is one of the most important documents of any lab, and it has the quality policy, objectives, it addresses the issue that it is trying to, it addresses various aspects of the quality policy of the hospital or the lab. It has references to the other levels of documents, the level 2, level 3 documents, which are mainly procedures, or in level 3, you may have forms, logs, which are there. So there has to be, when you're making the documents for your lab, you have to have a hierarchy of your documents. And what should be the documents? The document should include these main points. What is the purpose of reading that document? That has to be stated. What is the scope, in the sense, what all tests are being, it is being covered in that document. Is it specific to serum? Is it specific to urine? Or is it, broad? So all those things need to be mentioned. Responsibilities of personnel regarding those documents, as well as how those quality systems are going to be implemented, need to be put in those documents. You have to define your aims and objectives, and also the procedure that is going to be followed need to be spelled out very clearly. You have to give references for whatever you are saying is to be followed. And then you may have a checklist in terms of what all documents are going to be additional in addition to the SOPs and logs that you're creating. So broadly, there are two components in the NABL. You have a managerial component and a technical component. So managerial component, it involves that if you have adequate staff, have they been recruited properly, their induction has it been done, their training has it been completed, have they been trained on specific analyzers, specific kinds of systems. Is there an adequate allocation of space? You are trying to get in a new analyzer or system. Is the space adequate? Is the other ancillary stuff, like the LIS that is there, the worker requirements, are all those things in place? And most organizations, they need to conduct a regular management review meeting where the administration and the lab personnel, they are going to communicate. And it is bi-directional. So the lab raises whatever issue they are facing. Maybe related to consumption of certain reagents, kits. It may be related to experience with their vendors. It may be related to some of the policies that they need to be changed at an institutional level. And the management also takes note of that, and they review whatever, if it's an NABL accredited lab, they review whatever NCs have been raised in the assessment. They also have a discussion about internal audits, whatever NCs are raised in the internal audits, and then they try to address those issues. So some of them can be closed easily, some of them are more structural and take longer duration to close those NCs. So those meetings are important. So this is just a picture. You are all aware there are a lot of points in the 15189, and I'll not be going in detail with all of these points, but they pertain to the organization and management responsibility, the quality management system, documentation, QMS, contents of quality manual, and so on. So I'll just quickly skim through these. You have already been, exposed to many of these in previous lectures. So document control, which is important. There are agreements which are there in place. You may have a reagent rental contract. It may not be a single reagent rental contract. You may have multiple contracts with different vendors. So those things, those agreements, their timelines, their legal implications, all those things are important, which may be asked for during the assessments. If you are sending samples to a referral lab, you should be having a MOU or a policy as to when and which kind of samples you're going to send, how you're going to send, under what conditions those samples are going to be transported, how is the reporting going to be done, what is the format you're going to use in the report, so on. So, there should also be a system for feedback and then root cause analysis, corrective action, preventive action, continual improvement. So all these terms are going to repeat, and any audit, any assessment, be it internal, external, these things are the things these are the points that are going to be looked into in detail. So if your systems are good, then you will not have any issues with respect to these points. Otherwise, you will need to continually develop and make your policies more stringent. So Going ahead, technical components. So technical components are more related to the quality issues, quality indicators, the audit manual per se, which involves, NCs, it may be internal NC, institutional, it may be NCs which are being raised during the assessment, and also how you have addressed your internal NCs, and have you done a root cause analysis? How do you address your outliers, your internal? So most of the labs in biochemistry, when you do have, every day you are going to run multi-level QCs, at least, depending on your workload, at least once, and depending on the time of your lab's functioning. So it's a 24-hour lab and the volumes are big. Maybe 3 times you're going to be running the QC. So what do you do when there are outliers? So you cannot just leave it that, okay, I've just redone the sample and it came back within the 2HD and then all is fine. So that does not solve the problem, because what is important is you have to go to the root of the problem. You have to understand why did it not come correct in the first place. Was there an issue with the temperature? Was there an issue with the reagent? Was the reagent topped up? Was the reagent not stored properly? Was the QC material not stored properly? Was it a machine problem? Was it a random error problem? Was it a human error because of pipetting? Was it a problem because your pipettes are not calibrated? So those kind of root cause analysis need to be done. And they need to be documented, not at a later date. As and when they are done, they need to be documented there and then. SOPs need to be very clear, and it should be so clear that the newest recruit who has been given an induction and a fair amount of training, they should be able to understand from the SOP what is to be done. Then you have to maintain logs and records. This is a given calibration, temperature, calibration of both analytical and non-analytical instruments, temperature, documentation of both for your storage areas. You have a fridge which is supposed to maintain a 2 rate, but if you're not documenting it, you don't know when the machine is, when the fridge is not working properly. So by the time you realize, maybe some of your QC material is already spoiled, but your sample stability is also gone down because you have stored your samples in those machines. So logs and records are important. Document control is important because there are certain documents which should not be changed by anyone. And if there is no control and it is easily accessible to everyone, those errors may replay. It's just like, you have a DNA, you cannot have mutations in the DNA, is it? There are a lot of modifications which deepen in the RNA, but that's all right. You have missense mutations, you have silent mutations, it doesn't make any difference. The final protein is the protein that it is supposed to make. So this is why document control is important. Again, similarly, we have those charts which address those technical components. This is basically a list which we follow, a checklist which we follow in our internal audits in Tata. And it is in line with the 15189. The points are in line with 15189. So it has like the lab equipment, reagents, consumables, assays. So if you have documents, you have equipment, you have documents pertaining to its installation, you have documents pertaining to its IQ, PQ. Okay, and if there are breakdowns, you have documents relating to the breakdown or the breakdown logs there. Similarly for reagents, consumables, when are they received? Is there a contract which is there? Similarly for other processes like pre-analytical phase. So if the information for any test, if the patients, if the samples are, if you're also analyzing referred samples, so are the conditions in which the sample needs to be collected, transported or stored, is that information accessible to other clinicians or other people who are going to send that sample to you? Those kind of documentation need to be in place if you are doing those aspects. To say sample transportation, related to examination process, what tests are being done, how are you verifying, how have you validated your new system? If you have been traditionally doing HB1C on your biochemistry auto analyzer, and now you want to shift on to HPLC, you have to have a proper documentation of method validation and comparison between your immunoassay and HPLC. Of course, there are two different ways you are analyzing, and there are going to be limitations to both. But you have to have a proper system where you are addressing those limitations and you're documenting, you're noting down the percent variation and you're doing it in different ways. And these are important aspects of the technical components. So I'll not go in detail in all of them for all of them. While releasing the results, you should be careful if your reporting system is, with the NIS, excuse me, if it is bidirectional, you have to do a NIS evaluation periodically. Because there are many things what we have also observed. You may have a report which is of some other parameter, which is going in place of another parameter. So we don't want those kind of things because that is like a wrong report which is going. So you should have checks in place which can identify those things and prevent them from happening. So the first part is implementation, and second part, whenever those happen, you have to document that as okay, we had this incident reporting is there, and internal NCs can be reached over such issues. Not just the lab, we get our samples from the collection area, so we should also have a checklist and have a monitoring over the collection areas also. And this is basically some of the points that we address when we look at the collection area. Is the reception waiting area separate, hand washing facilities, proper storage of supplies, so on. So every organization can develop their own, depending on their requirements, they need to develop their own set of questions and points that they need to do. They need to address when they're looking at these points for the pre-collection and collection. This is a copy of one of the NC data which we raised during our NC. So you have what kind of, I wanted to show this because the kind of details that are there. You have mentioning the department in which this audit was done. You have the section, if it is a particular section which is being audited, that is to be mentioned. If there is any NCs that are raised, what is the clause as per 15189? If there is a correct, and then subsequent to the raising of the NC, what is the proposed action the labs will take? And what is the timeline, is the corrective action taken? And finally, all the details which are there with respect to the issue, the issue date, amended date, and those things which are like there in all the documents, they have to be there. Quality indicator chart, how do you know? Whatever you're measuring, are you on the right track or not? So you need quality indicators. These are some of the quality indicators that we follow. We have broadly divided them as pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical. So the pre-analytical ones, we have related to what are the percentage of samples that we're rejecting because they are wrong requisitions, they are connected in the wrong tube. There is mislabeling, and mind you, it is not that if you have barcoding that everything is going to be fine. Even with barcoding, there are high chances of mislabeling. And one way you can identify that mislabeling is by doing very good data checks if you have that option. It is not always available. If it's an OPD patient, you may not have that. But if it's an IPD patient, you can probably go back and see if the previous values which were done, if the previous sample was tested a day or two prior, and the samples are so diverse or so different, which is not biologically possible in a single day. That means you are measuring either that sample was of someone else's or this is of someone else's. So that you need to investigate. Right? So these are some of the things: analytical indicators, incidence of sample mix-up during processing. This can happen when you have one tube and you have multiple barcodes. So you have additional requisitions which are being generated. And so you get a call from the clinician, okay, I have sent this sample in the morning and I want to add this test. Do you have adequate sample? They'll say, okay, they'll send you a barcode. Now they'll send you a barcode, but you have to manually either import whatever was there in the previous tube to a new tube. If there is any error there, there's mismatch. For whatever reason, there is a chance of measuring somebody else's sample in place of what you are supposed to measure in the first place. Outliers, both for internal and external QC, they're always going to be an important component. You need to do root cause analysis for all these outliers, document whenever these outliers are there. Because in the long run, it is helpful for the lab. Similarly, for post-analytical, turnaround times are important. We have a system of reporting critical values whenever, especially for electrolytes, severe hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hyponatremia, hypernatremias, very high glucose levels, bicarb levels, all those things, yeah. Cardiac markers like troponin, CKNB. We have a system where we identify where the patient is located. Is it OPD, IPD? Who's the treating physician? And we do inform. And we have a feedback policy. It is documented at what time that information was transmitted. Was it registered correctly? And who was it transmitted to? The name of the person is also noted down. Okay, so these are some of the quality indicators that we follow. Now, going ahead, during audit, you have to label. Signages are important. Whatever processes are being done in whichever area, they need to be labeled properly. And so that it is clear to anyone who is working in that area. So these are some of the, workflows that are there in our lab. I've just taken this picture to show you. This is one of the maintenance, like your maintenance, your daily maintenance, weekly, monthly, all kinds of maintenance for different analyzers. And everyone is not going to be as comfortable working on a particular analyzer as he's on another one. So whenever there's a change in shift or duty or a new person comes in, they need to follow these kind of SOPs. Similarly, monitoring, we have already seen this. Monitoring is important. Temperature monitoring and log. So you have a temperature monitor and we are maintaining the logs of those temperature for the release. Calibration for both analytical and non-analytical instruments are necessary, and calibrations come with a date. They are not universal, so you have to again go ahead and recalibrate when the date is over. So finally, take-home message. From the auditor's perspective, the audit process can be simplified with the help of very good planning, clear and effective documentation, and storage of relevant documents and procedures. Regular reviews of these documents, customized obviously to the lab's needs. You should try and avoid duplication of your work. Formulation of a very good and clear quality policy and other relevant documents. Regular training is obviously necessary, and refresher courses always help lab personnel. And this is the key for a successful lab audit. Now, all this is not possible without a team. It is not a single person's job. So this is our team at Tata, and most organizations need a good team to skim through a very good audit. Okay, thank you. So, if there are any questions?